the Game Boy Advance, Nintendo's follow-up to the wildly successful Game Boy and Game Boy Color systems. They didn't rest on their previous accomplishments, however, and instead crafted what could be best described as a souped-up Super Nintendo in a portable format. The system has many great games available while still maintaining full backwards compatibility. All in all, a fantastic gaming experience you can bring just about anywhere. This launch model, however, has one major flaw compared to the later released SP version, one we'll try and correct in this video. Welcome back to Rick's Random Retro, where we really like to shine a light on things. The Game Boy Advance launched in 2001 featuring a 2.9-inch widescreen TFT color display. Quite a step up from the previous generation, but the major thing missing was backlighting. While Nintendo corrected this in their follow-up model, the Game Boy Advance SP, the original model was left in the dark. Taking a closer look as we power it on here, we clearly see, or should I say not see, the major problem with the screen. This model lacks any sort of backlighting, forcing you to rely on an external light source. I have two studio lights pointing directly on the Game Boy here, and it's still hard to even capture properly. Solid lighting is a must to enjoy gaming on it, limiting your options. And as I turn off my studio lights and rely on the regular overhead lighting, the reflection isn't quite as bad, but it's still pretty hard to see the screen very well. This definitely has an impact on enjoying this otherwise great system, so let's take a crack at fixing that. Part of a kit I ordered online, this is a reproduction screen based on the later released SP model AGS-101. The screen is much more vivid and above all includes integrated backlighting. Included was also an adapter cable we need to connect the screen to our Game Boy. Next, the kit also came with a nice lens cover made of glass as opposed to the original plastic one. This should help increase screen clarity even further. So, let's start by opening the system up. We have our lovely plaid cloth in pink to protect our Game Boy from scratches as we work on it. First, we'll want to take the battery cover off and the batteries out. Next, there are 6 triangle bit screws we have to undo. Fortunately, the kit came with a screwdriver for that very job. Now with those screws free, we have one last Phillips screw as the last line of defense before we gain access to the insides of the system. With the back cover off, we can see the main motherboard exposed. Up here is the ribbon cable that connects the screen, and we will need to unplug this. However, since all the plastic spacers and the L and R buttons are basically falling out, we'll remove those first. Here I tried to use my fingernails to pop up the locks holding the ribbon cable in place. But don't be like me here and actually use a flathead screwdriver to make your life easier. I eventually do get it, I promise. Our next task is to undo these 3 screws holding the motherboard in place. With those finally removed, we can gently lift the whole motherboard straight up out of the case. Here I'm taking the rubber backings and the buttons out so we can give them a nice clean before putting them back in the system. Now we need to remove the soft padding behind the screen. And yes, I already had a go at removing this before, as you can probably see. Just take your time. After this, we'll need to very gently pry the old screen out from the case, which is affixed with double stick tape. Again, take your time and don't pry too hard if you want to save the screen. It should eventually pop right out. The screen is now free from the case, and we won't be needing this again for this project. If you're also replacing your screen cover, now's the time to remove that. Simply pushing out gently should eventually pop it right out. With this old plastic screen cover out, we are now free to give the case a nice cleaning before starting the next step, which is to make some modifications in preparation for the new screen. This case wasn't very dirty, so just some alcohol cleaned it up just fine. This is my original model after all, and even as a kid I was careful not to eat Cheetos before I played anything. Your mileage may vary here. Now the challenge we face here is that this screen originally wasn't designed to fit in this model, something we can quite easily see if we place the screen where it needs to go. We can quickly see that there are plastic ridges in the way that held the original screen in place. We will need to remove some of these before we can properly install the new screen. Having removed the ridges that were in the way here, we can now see that the new screen fits in the way we want it to. If you do attempt this, I will say use a sharp knife and be very patient, slowly peeling that plastic away. Cussing as you progress may be advisable here. The next step is the oh so satisfying removal of the plastic protecting the screen. After that, we put the screen in place, taking some care that it's centered in the case. All the buttons clean up nicely as well, and they all pop right back in without any problems. Cleaning the buttons on a game controller, or in this case a system, can make quite a difference in how it feels to use. Personally, I think it's well worth the time investment, especially here when we already have it open. Now it's time to install the adapter we need to connect the new screen. As you can see, it's quite the hassle getting the cable lined up in a way that makes sense due to the odd angle in play here. Use your best judgment and what makes sense to you if you attempt this. I should note I made one major mistake here I had to come back and correct. The main cable is actually flipped upside down and the screen will not work in this configuration. Here's a picture when I went back and fixed it so it's turned the right way. So, pretending that little mess up with the cable didn't happen, we then place back the motherboard and make sure everything is aligned. Now we simply need to reinstall the L and R buttons as well as put the screw securing the board back in place. At this point, we need to attach the ribbon cable for the screen to the socket on the motherboard. Once again, keep in mind that I had this flipped here and had to go back and correct it later. With that completed, we have this extra wire that you can solder on at a specific point to get extra brightness for your new screen. I done a basic test without this and the screen felt plenty bright to me, so at least for now, we'll simply tuck this out of the way. With that done, we then put our power switch back in place. With the last work inside the case completed, we're now free to put the back of the case back on. Do take some care here. If it's too tight, you may have to take some more plastic out from the case to make it fit correctly. The space needed may vary depending on where you got your screen from. Hum your favorite montage music here as we yet again fast forward through putting all these screws back in. Now that we have the case put back together, the last task we have left is to install the new glass lens to replace the original one, which is made out of plastic. It comes with double stick tape already on it, making it for a pretty easy install. Just make sure you commit to the alignment, as I have a feeling it won't come off very easy once it's on. With the lens finally on, we can once again perform the satisfying task of peeling the protective plastic off. It really never gets old. Our upgraded Game Boy Advance is complete. It's hard to really appreciate the screen here, so instead let's check out some games. Here's a personal favorite of mine, Castlevania Aria of Sorrow. Another favorite, this is Metroid Zero Mission. And yes, I like Metroidvanias. Here's something classic, Super Mario World. And finally, why not? Here's Godzilla Domination. So just so we don't forget where we actually came from, here is the Mega Man Zero intro running on our upgraded Game Boy Advance next to a launch version of the SP, also known as the AGS-001. It uses a frontlit screen, really showing the difference the backlighting makes here. All in all, it's quite a contrast, especially considering I'm using just the overhead lighting here, so there isn't much extra light for the camera. This ran a bit longer than I anticipated, but I'm extremely happy with this upgrade. My launch model Advance has now been dusted off from its resting place on my shelf and has switched to the primary way I enjoy the games for this system. The form factor sits better in my hands than the SP model, and finally having a proper backlit screen allows me to bring this anywhere to play. I'd consider this a well worth thing to undertake if you have an original Game Boy Advance sitting around. I'm not exactly electronically skilled, and there were a few bumps along the road, but overall I consider this project a success. If you enjoyed this video, perhaps you'd like to check out some of these, and don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Rick, thank you very much for watching, and remember everyone, stay classy.